things are not going to be okay with you and your partner and the physical intimacy involved, is going to affect your self-esteem, your confidence, your work, productivity, creativity.
So there's a stereotype that men are like way more sex motivated than women. Is that true or is that a myth?
Women's bodies are so complex. You might just end up bumping into someone who introduces you to some fetish or kink that you were like, I didn't know I could go down that route.
Love it. Hello and welcome back to another episode where we talk to experts to really unpack and decode all the aspects of love, relationships, dating, and marriage. Intimacy and sex is one of those things that is so critical and core to our relationships and to marriages. And yet in Indian culture, I think even still today, we've sort of brushed it aside into some shameful corner of our minds. And so with us today, we have Nikita, who has also specialized in sex therapy. Welcome, Nikita.
Thank you. And I'm glad we're finally talking about this topic. It was long due.
So can you just talk a little bit in general about the role that physical intimacy and sexual compatibility plays in relationships?
When we were taught in school about anatomy, that was our first introduction. And the way movies kind of portrayed intimacy, magazine that was kind of slipped, or a friend showed you that, hey, look, I have this on my phone. That is how someone got introduced to what intimacy was. And there was a gap in understanding what it truly means. Like, it seems almost alien when someone asks you to explore your sexuality. For women especially, there's a lot of shame and guilt attached with it. You always end up thinking that I'm doing something wrong.
Or dirty, or shameful,
Exactly. And the times are definitely now changing. There is much more awareness about what intimacy is. It's no longer about reproduction or procreation. But when it comes to seeing sexuality, intimacy, desirability, pleasure in relationships, it's a different ballgame altogether, because you could feel emotionally connected to someone and not be physically connected to them. You could be physically connected to them and not feel emotionally intimate. But when you have the two working, then that's where the magic happens. There is always an element of physical intimacy which plays right from the beginning, which would really predict how happy you are in your relationship and then in your marriage later on. Because if something is missing on both the sides, the relationship is going to break.
Wow. So interesting. For so long, we were taught that sex was only about reproduction and just functional, whereas I think it's really important to talk about how crucial it is to forming an emotional bond with someone and to give pleasure and joy to each other in like a selfless way as well. So there's a stereotype that men are like way more sex motivated than women. Is that true or is that a myth?
I don't think so that's the case. I think women are equally sexual and desire pleasure. It's no longer the case where a man only wants it, and that really changed after the invention of birth control. It was no longer about procreation. It was about pleasure and freedom and being creative and transcendence, and they could really explore themselves, their bodies, the act. I would like to think that biologically women just crave more emotional connection and oxytocin, whereas for men it could be very driven by testosterone.
Yes, that's true.
So biologically there is a difference.
That's true. See, in Indian culture, there's a lot of suppression that's going on, especially as women, but I would say overall. So how do I step into a state of feeling comfortable in my own sexuality, in embracing and accepting that I am a sexual being, and also reconciling any issues with my body image that prevent me from fully giving into this experience?
I think that's a really important question. It hits home for women, because there's just so much on social media that you have to be a particular way. And when you're not, you don't feel confident in your own skin. For a woman, they would always have to think that I need to look a certain way for the person to feel desirable towards me. But actually, that's not the case. I have heard men say that I was not attracted to her body. I was attracted to the fact that she was comfortable with her body. Like how she was comfortable with being desirable and accepting her desirability.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you look. It's about, are you comfortable in yourself? And if you're not, then that is going to reflect in your energy, your relationships, how you see yourself, how you kind of bring yourself out when it comes to any intimate moment. We're not only talking about sex, right? It could be any intimate moment, like a hand around the shoulder or a long hug, looking into the eye, and then you could feel a little uncomfortable with that sense of vulnerability. So it comes out in the most unexpected ways. For someone to feel empowered, they have to first really sit down and reflect on, how am I feeling in my own skin? And especially in marriages, right? We have heard about how someone may lose interest because their body is changed and not how they looked when we got married. Look at our marriage pictures and look at how it is now. So all these narratives keep running into people's minds and into, you know, a long-term relationship as well. So feeling empowered right from the beginning and kind of continuing that right till the end takes a lot of work and self-acceptance.
It's true. There's nothing sexier than confidence, right? And I think there's so many men who just adore their partners for who they are. And it's actually their partners who feel so much insecurity around their appearance, because it's so mental for us that physically whatever is going on can happen. But if I'm not mentally present with that person, or if I don't really feel strongly for that person, then I think it strips away any point of that act in the first place.
That's such a beautiful point, because physical intimacy is always looked from the lens of there has to be an outcome.
Yeah.
It has to be A, B, C. Follow the routine, done. And women's bodies are so complex. No one ever asks us that, what is something that works for you? What is something that doesn't work for you? Are you comfortable? Is this good? It's high time that men start to understand that it's not A, B, C. If you're going to follow a routine, if you're going to do the same thing in the same way for the next 3 years, it's going to get boring. And you need to spice things up a little bit. Intimacy doesn't have to be intercourse, right? It could be having a shower together, cuddling together. Be in the present instead of thinking, okay, I need to get to the end goals. I think that's when things truly become fun.
Yeah. When the sexual side of the relationship peters out, or becomes boring or becomes vanilla, how it affects your relationship overall and has downstream implications. Can you comment a little bit more on that?
So if things are not going to be okay with you and your partner and the physical intimacy involved, it's going to affect your self-esteem, your confidence, your work, productivity, creativity, your relationship with others. It's just going to spiral into something that you were not even expected to, and would come up in different ways in different areas of your life. Maybe a woman would just start focusing on the children a lot, and that's when the distance grows and becomes more and more between the two partners. You'll start distracting yourself. You'll start spending so much time at work because you're kind of avoiding coming back. You stop trying date nights. You feel rejected, na? So,
or worse, infidelity. I mean, it does open up space for that when one is not satisfied.
Physical ke saath emotional always kind of goes hand in hand.
At what point in the relationship should you explore a physical connection with someone? Because for women, like, that's a really surefire way to get attached to someone. What would you say about that?
Very subjective. How important is it for someone to know that they're sexually compatible to kind of take it forward from there? For some, it is very important. Like, I'll remember Dadi Ji, right, from Love Stories, who said that have sex before marriage. Because if it is not good, it's not going to be a great marriage, and you better rule it out from the very get-go. And the granddaughter did take her advice, and they were happily married. But it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to break your virginity, or you don't have to have sex before marriage. You can always negotiate your sexual compatibility after marriage as well.
Can you?
Of course, आप हर चीज negotiate करते हो ना. You negotiate, okay, who's going to get this, who's going to go do this in the house, I'll take care of the kids, etc. You negotiate everything. Why can't this be negotiated and communicated later on?
Do you think that sexual incompatibility is a deal breaker? Do you think that's something that is so essential to a marriage that if that is not there, you should consider not marrying that person? Imagine if all the other checklist items have been met except that one.
There's a spectrum when it comes to being romantically involved or looking at sexuality. For few folks, they might not consider sexual compatibility to be very important. Like, it's not one of the non-negotiables. But for majority of the folks, we see that sexual compatibility is important, and it does play a role in relationships. So you you have to really figure it out for yourself. Is it part of your non-negotiable? Because there could be demisexuals. They have to be emotionally connected to feel physically intimate with someone. And if the emotional connection is not there, it just wouldn't happen. But they would still be in a relationship with emotional compatibility being there.
It's an individual decision, basically. And yet so important for most of us, I would say.
For most of us, yeah.
What is your take on like sexual promiscuity versus like sexual monogamy? By that I mean, is it better for someone to explore various partners before like kind of settling down?
Having multiple partners, putting yourself into the deep end, exploring, figure out what you like. You know, you might just end up bumping into someone who introduces you to some fetish or kink that you were like, I didn't know I could go down that route.
Love it.
You really learn a lot from like these intimate experiences and, you know, moments that you have with different partners. And then you realize, okay, this is something that doesn't work for me. Like if someone's choking me to the extent that I can't breathe, like not working. But if there is, you know, a place where you're trying out something which is a little different, but you're kind of enjoying it, then you learn a lot from what you really want. And you can kind of take that into your long-term relationship as well. But it doesn't have to be like that. You could have one partner and try out 10 different things.
So you're saying sexual incompatibility can be overcome with time, and I think with a lot of open communication.
Communication is a difficult part. First of all, we were never taught to communicate, and then you're communicating about sexuality and oh my god, like you don't want to talk about it. You're dreading it. But once you do it, things might change.
So interesting. If somebody out there is feeling really uncomfortable about this topic or is feeling a lot of anxiety about doing this, maybe for the first time or maybe for the first time with a new person, what advice would you give them to help them unpack this and feel more at ease?
I think I would first ask them to think about what is the part that is making them uncomfortable. Is it something to do with something that happened in the past? Could be a bad experience with your other partners. Is it body image related? Are you not feeling confident? Does it make you feel vulnerable too close? Are you scared of getting hurt if you get too attached to them too soon? Or is it that these are general nerves that you kind of feel before jumping into the deep end? So it could be different things for different people, but just sitting and understanding what your trigger is and kind of working around that. Have the conversation about whatever is bothering you. If you can't have the conversation,
don't do it if you're not ready, you know?
Like, in my opinion,
if you're not able to talk about it openly, you're probably not mature enough or ready enough to do that. Like, you have some growing up to do. You know, I think there's become a really unfortunate association between virginity and purity. Like, because sex is such a dirty thing in our culture, that somehow it strips you of some kind of innocence, of some kind of purity, and now you're tarnished as a human being. I hope that we can move past it and see sex as like a positive thing.
You know, there are temples in Madhya Pradesh and down south where you do see very clear, explicit depictions and scriptures which have all of this written, and especially in the Hindu philosophy, right? You see that out on the temples and in the carvings and all of that, and like it's very cardinal, and it's part of the hierarchy of like gods and goddesses.
This shame is like a more recent phenomenon in India and in our culture. I want to say that I really think it's a result of colonization and the cultural imperialism that the West has sort of had. Media telling us that this is bad or this is shameful and stuff like that. Then hopefully we can let go of that as well. Because now the West has also moved on from that and we're still clinging on to it. So crazy.
It's a juxtaposition. Ek side pe aapko ye dikha rahe ho, dusri side pe they're like, shh.
This has been such a pleasure, Nikita. I have never thought about this from so many different angles and in so many different ways. I really, really benefited from this conversation. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Always. I think I've equally enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for watching another episode. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit subscribe, share it with your friends, hit the like button, and comment down below what other topics we should interview experts about next. See you in the next one.